it might be because of the overflow of love, it might be difficult to appreciate more like genuine little moments of love. And
It's not for me. No. I spent a lot of time thinking about that, and I also spent a lot of time thinking about how titanically bizarre my place in the world is. I mean, I think about it a lot, and I spent a lot of time being poor and being a loser. I mean, my childhood was not the best. I went through a lot of struggle when I was young that I cling to like a safety raft. You know, I don't ever think there's something special about me, and I try to let everybody know that anybody can do what I've done. You just have to just keep going. It's like 99% of this thing is just showing up and keep going. Keep improving, keep working at things, and keep going. Put the time in.
But the interesting thing is, you haven't actually, a couple of days ago, went back to your first podcast and listened to it. You haven't really changed much. So the audio got a little better. But just like the genuine nature of the way you interact hasn't changed. And that's fascinating because, fame changes people.
Well, I was already famous then. I just was
in a different way.
Yeah, I was famous. I was already famous from Fear Factor. I already had stand-up comedy specials. I'd already been on a sitcom. I wasn't as famous as I am now, but I understood what it is. I'm a big believer in adversity and struggle. I think they're very important for you. It's one of the reasons why I appreciate martial arts. It's one of the reasons why I've been drawn to it as a learning tool. Not just as something where it's a puzzle that I'm fascinated to try to figure out how to get better at the puzzle. And martial arts is a really good example because you're never really the best, especially when there's just so many people doing it. It's like you're always going to get beat by guys. And then I was never putting the kind of time into it as an adult outside of my Taekwondo competition. I was never really putting all day, every day into it like a lot of people that I would train would. And so I'd always get dominated by the really best guys. Yeah. So there's a certain amount of humility that comes from that as well. But there's a struggle in that you're learning about yourself and your own limits and the limits of the human mind and endurance and just not understanding all the various interactions of techniques, and that there's humility to that, in that I've always described martial arts as a vehicle for developing your own human potential. But I think marathon running has similar aspects. I think when you figure out a way to keep pushing and push through, the control of your mind and your desire and overcoming adversity. I think overcoming adversity is critical for the human. Because for humans, we have this set of reward systems that are designed to reward us for overcoming obstacles, for overcoming relationship struggles, for overcoming physical limitations. And those rewards are great, and they're some of the most amazing moments in life when you do overcome. And I think this is sort of engineered into the system. Mm-hmm. So for me, fame is almost like a cheat code. It's like you don't really want it. Don't dwell on that, man. Like that's like a free buffet. Like you don't, you want to go hunt your own food. You want to make your own fire. You want to cook it yourself and feel the satisfaction. You don't want people feeding you grapes while you lie down.
What is the hardest thing? So you talk about challenge a lot. What's the hardest thing when have you been really humbled?
Martial arts, for sure. The most humbling. Yeah, from the moment I started. I got really good at Taekwondo, but even then I'd still get the fuck beaten out of me by my friends. I got training partners, especially when you're tired and you're doing, you're rotating partners and guys are bigger than you. It's just humbling. Martial arts are very humbling.
So I got to call you out on something. So you talk about education systems. Sometimes I've heard you say a little broken in high school and so on. I'm not really calling you out. I just want to talk about it because I think it's important. And as somebody who loves math, you talked, but your own journey was school didn't give you passion, value. Well, you can maybe talk to that, but for me, what I always, and maybe I'm sick in the head or something. But for me, math was exciting the way martial arts were exciting for you because it was really hard. I wanted to quit. And the idea with education I have that seems to be flawed nowadays a little bit is that we want to make education easier. That we want to make, more accessible and so on. Accessible, of course, is great. But you kind of forget in that, and those are all good goals. You forget in that it's supposed to be also hard. And like teachers, just the way you're a wrestling coach, if you like quit, you say, I can't do anymore, I have to, you come up with some kind of excuse, your wrestling coach looks at you once and say, get your ass back on the mat. The same way I wish math teachers did. That when people say, it's almost like cool now to say, it's not, math sucks, math's not for me, or science sucks, this teacher is boring. I think there's room for some culture where it says, no, you're not. If you just put in the time and you struggle, then that opens up the universe to you. Like whether you become a Neil deGrasse Tyson or the next Fields Medal winner in mathematics.
I would not argue with you for 1 second. I would also say that one of the more beautiful things about human beings is that we vary so much. And that one person who is just obsessed with playing the trombone, and to me, I don't give a fuck about trombones, but that's okay. Like, I can't be obsessed about everything. Some people love golf, and they just want to play it all day long. I've never played golf a day in my life, except miniature golf, and just fucking around. But that it's not bad or good. And I think there's definitely some skills that you learn from mathematics that are hugely significant if you want to go into type of fields that you're involved in. For me, it's never been appealing. But it's not that it was just difficult. It's also that it just, for whatever reason, who I was at that time in that school with those teachers, having the life experience that I had, that was not what I was drawn to. But what I was drawn to was literature. I was drawn to reading. I was drawn to stories. I was drawn to possibilities and creativity. I was drawn to all those things.
You were an artist a bit too, right?
Yeah. I used to want to be a comic book illustrator. That was a big thing when I was young. I was really into comic books. I was really into it was traditional comic books and also a lot of the horror comics from the 1970s, the black and white, like creepy and eerie. Did you ever see those things? Creepy and eerie?
Like black and white? Like
yeah,
what?
they were a comic book series that existed like way back in the day. They were all horror, and they were like really cool illustrations and these wild stories, but it was comic books, but they were all black and white. That's creepy and eerie.
Oh, that's the actual name.
Yeah, eerie and creepy were the names. See, like that was from what year was that? It says September, but it doesn't say what year. But I used to get these when I was a little kid, man. I was like 8, 9 years old in the 70s.
Good and evil.
Yeah, it was. They were my favorite. Like that's a cover of them, and like they would have like covers that were done by like Frank Frazetta or Boris Vallejo, and just really cool shit. And I was fat. I loved those when I was little. I was always really into horror movies and really into like Like look at this werewolf one. That was one of my favorite ones. That was a crazy werewolf that was like all fours.
Who's the hero usually? Superhero
There's no
or
heroes.
regular?
Everybody dies in those. That's the beautiful thing about it.
dies.
Everybody gets fucked over. There's nobody. That was the thing that I really liked about them. Was that like nobody made it out alive. There was no one guy who figured it out and rescued the woman and they rode off in the sunset.
But
You would turn the corner and there'd be a fucking pack of wolves with glowing eyes waiting to tear everybody apart, and that'd be the end of the book. And I was just really into the illustrations. I found them fascinating. I love those kind of horror movies, and I love those kinds of illustrations. So that's what I wanted to do when I was young.
Yeah, I think the education system is probably, we talked about creativity, it's probably not as good at inspiring and feeding that creativity. Because I think math and wrestling can be taught systematically. I think creativity is something, well, actually I know nothing about it. So I think it's harder to take somebody like you when you're young and say, and inspire you to pursue that fire, whatever's inside.
Well, one of the best ways to inspire people is by giving them these alternatives that are so uninteresting like saying, you're going to get a job selling washing machines. And you're like, fuck that. I'm going to figure out a way to not get a job selling washing machines. Like, some of the best motivations that I've ever had have been terrible jobs. Because you have these terrible jobs, and you go, okay, fuck that. I'm going to figure out a way to not do this. You know, and whether you want to call it ADD or ADHD or whatever it is that makes kids squirm in class. I didn't squirm in every class. I didn't squirm in science class. I didn't squirm in interesting subjects. There was things that were interesting to me that I would be locked in and completely fascinated by, and there was things where I just couldn't wait to run out of that room. And I don't know what the reason is, but I do know that a lot of what we call our education system is engineered for a very specific result. And that result is you want to get a kid who can sit in class and learn so that they could sit in a job and perform. And that, for whatever reason, that was just, I mean, I didn't have the ideal childhood. Maybe if I did, I would be more inclined to lean that way. But I didn't want to do anything like that. Like, I couldn't wait to get the fuck out of school so I didn't ever have to listen to anybody like that again. And then just a few years later, I mean, you graduate from high school when you're 18. When I was 21, I was a stand-up comic. And I was like, I found it. This is it. I'm like, good. I found there's an actual job that nobody told me about where you could just make fun of shit. And people go out and they pay money to hear you create jokes and routines and bits.
Really? You weren't